welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 47. We are starting out this week with Naked Singularity. 5 mana artifact. Has a pretty hefty cumulative upkeep of 3, but has one of the most bizarre abilities you'll ever see on a card. It is incredibly unique, so I thought I would give it a mention, even though I'm not sure where exactly you would use it. If tapped for mana, plains produce red mana, islands produce green, swamps produce white, mountains produce blue, and forests produce black instead of any other type. So this is a very weird, very bizarre sort of Blood Moon effect, right? So it's not like Blood Moon. I'm only using Blood Moon as an example because what Blood Moon does, everyone is very familiar with. Non-basic lands, add red mana, that's all they do. This does that same similar effect, except with all lands of those land types, again, not just basic lands. And if a land has more than one basic land type, like say a Godless Shrine, which is a swamp and a plains, tapping the land for mana can choose to produce mana of either color. So that can be really important, and I think that might be the only real way, other than I just want to throw the game for a loop, which obviously that will do. The real way that you could strategically use this card is that you have a bunch of lands, like Triomes, for example, that add a whole bunch of different mana. So if you have a Ketria Triome, that is a forest, island, mountain. So the island part will produce green, the mountain part will produce blue, and the forest part will produce black. So you're still getting the green and the blue, and you're getting black instead of red. So, you know, if you're in a 5-color deck, that's not really hurting you at all, I don't think. So that might be a great way to use this. Another interesting way to use this is the opposite of a Blood Moon, right? What does a Blood Moon do? Well, it hates on all those non-basic lands, and the guys playing basic lands are just fine. Naked Singularity could be the opposite of that, right? If you have a bunch of lands in play that just don't have land types at all, like a command tower, for example, a command tower is still going to produce the mana it normally would. Any of those lands that don't have any land types, Naked Singularity does nothing there. So that might be another way to use this card. Just, it's such a weird, wacky, unique card. I thought I would give it a mention. The art as well, definitely interesting. But moving on to number 2 this week, Natural Balance, 2 green, sorcery. Each player who controls 6 or more lands chooses 5 lands they control and sacrifices the rest. So right out of the gate, that is a really powerful effect. And I think it sounds like a white card. You know, the first half of this card sounds like a white card. The second half sounds more like a green card, I suppose. Each player who controls 4 or fewer lands may search their library for up to X basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield, where X is 5 minus the number of lands they control. Then each player who searched their library this way shuffles. So quite simply, what this card does is it makes everybody have 5 lands. If you have more than 5 lands, you choose 5 and sacrifice the rest. If you have less than 5 lands, you go grab some basic lands to get you up to 5. So obviously there's a lot of ways to build around this. This is a card that I have never seen in a commander game. It has an incredibly powerful effect. I actually really like this card. I really wish it wasn't green. This really feels like a white card to me. In a green deck, it doesn't seem nearly as good because you're gonna probably be the person who has more lands than anyone. However, you can build around it, right? If you're in a Gitrog deck or some deck where you want to be sacrificing your lands, now I can sack a whole bunch of lands, then cast this and go refill up to 5 at the very least, and my opponents will probably hurt them as well. It is definitely a really powerful effect that I think it could fit in a couple of different decks. Coming in at number 3, Nature's Chosen. 1 green mana aura. Enchant creature you control, and you can pay 0. Untap enchanted creature. Activate only during your turn on only once each turn. Well, geez, I suppose there's a whole ton of commanders that you probably want to be untapping on your turn, right? This fits into a lot of decks. If you have a commander in green that has a tap ability, you can use it, then untap it, and use it again, obviously. Furthermore, I activate this on my turn, untap my commander, and then I can use my commander's tap ability on another opponent's turn, right? I don't have to do it on my turn. Also, though, you can tap enchanted creature, untap target artifact, creature, or land. Activate only if enchanted creature is white and untapped, and only once each turn. Okay, well, that sort of throws things for a little bit of a loop. So now if I want to use that second ability, the creature I'm enchanting has to be white, so now I have to be in a white and green deck. And you can use the first and second ability in concert, obviously, where you tap enchanted creature to untap an artifact, creature, or land, and then you can untap it with the first ability and do it again. I mean, there's obviously a lot of ways you can use this card, for sure, and I don't think I've ever seen it in a Commander game, maybe once way back in the day. It is very unique, for sure. Definitely deserves a mention. Coming in at number 4, Nature's Resurgence. 2 green sorcery. Each player draws a card for each creature card in their graveyard. That's very interesting. So, you know, this seems like a pretty fantastic draw spell if you're in a deck with lots of creature cards in your graveyard. I mean, man, a lot of people still play Harmonize. I don't think it's great. I think there are way better options in green. I think this is a better option. I think this is probably 90% of the time going to be better than a Harmonize. Yes, your opponents get to draw 2. You know, if your opponents have a lot of creatures in the graveyard, they will probably get a few cards off of this. If you're in a Marin deck or some deck where you're going to be filling your graveyard with lots of creatures, you're just going to be getting so much more advantage off of this, right? Your opponents might draw 2, maybe 3 cards off of this. You draw like 10 or 12. Seems pretty good. Coming in at number 5, Nature's Will. 2 green enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, tap all lands that player controls and untap all lands you control. So this is a card that back in the day I was like, wow, that's so great, because I was looking for a card for my Questing Beast deck, because I'm like, okay, you know, blue has a lot of those effects where if you deal damage, you get advantages out of it. Green doesn't have as many. This is one of them. I suppose there's more now. You got Orin Frostfang and cards like that. Those cards didn't exist when I first made my Questing Beast deck, and I was getting it for damage a lot, so I'm like, well, I want to get an advantage out of that. Other than obviously the commander damage, this was one of the cards that I threw in there. It was great. Works very similar to a sort of Feast and Famine. And that card is in most decks because of the untapping lands thing. People don't really care that much about the discard. It's mostly there so that I can tap out on my first main phase, attack, get in for damage, and then untap all my lands, so I basically get almost another turn. It is a very unique effect and a powerful one, and of course it has raised in price a lot. I was actually pretty surprised when I saw this card how expensive it was, and it never used to be. But I think a lot of people, again, have figured out that if you're in a green deck where you're getting in for damage all the time, it's just going to be really fantastic. Also, the added bonus is you're tapping your opponent's land. So you also can, if you're worried about counter spells, attack that counterspell heavy deck and tap down all that player's lands and then cast whatever it is you want to cast on your second main phase so that you don't have to worry about it getting countered. So it also works great there as well. Coming in at number 6, another one of my personal favorites is Necroplasm. 1 black ooze. Beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on Necroplasm. At the beginning of your end step, destroy each creature with mana value equal to the number of counters on Necroplasm. And has Dredge 2. So first of all, you're putting counters on it, so it works in a +1/+1 counter theme, in black. But more importantly, I think that middle ability there is the one that you really want. And why I really like this card is at the beginning of your end step, you destroy each creature with mana value equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it. And when you play this right away, it will have no counters on it. So on your end step, it's going to destroy each creature with mana value 0, which of course is all the tokens. This is a fantastic card for hating on token themes, and that has really been blowing up in the format lately. This has actually been reprinted in Commander sets before, but I think it is relevant to even give it a little bit more attention because, again, the token theme is so popular lately. I think particularly in 2021, it really blew up. It's just really nice to be able to throw this guy down, and then at the beginning of your end step that you immediately just played it, it destroys all the 0 mana value creatures, which of course is going to be the majority of the tokens in play. And then the next turn you get a counter on it, and then it's going to destroy all the 1s and then all the 2s. And then once you get to 3, it destroys itself, right? It is a 3 mana value creature. So once it has 3 counters on it, on the end step of that turn, it's going to destroy itself. So it's never going to get higher than 3, which also can be good, right? It also can be good if you have a commander that costs 4, or you have a higher mana value curve in your deck as far as creatures go. It can also be great for just hating on the low mana value creatures. And then obviously because it has Dredge 2, you can always just get it back and do it again, right? Coming in at number 7, Nicote. 3 mana equipment. and has equip 2. Whenever equipped creature deals damage to a creature, tap that creature. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as Nicote remains on the battlefield. When equipped creature deals damage to a player, that player loses 1 life. So the second ability is okay. It's, it's something, but it's not really what I am going to be concerned about here more. That first ability is really where it's at, I think. And the main reason why is whenever a equipped creature deals damage to a creature, it doesn't have to be combat damage. It can be any damage. I just put this in the Brigid Underwhelming Commanders deck that I did, or the suggestion that I made for that deck anyway. I just thought it was a fantastic fit there because obviously your Brigid is going to be dealing damage to a whole bunch of creatures all at once. Whether they be attacking or blocking creatures, you'll deal 2 damage to each of them, and any of them that you don't kill, you're going to tap them and they will remain tapped. Right? So any commander that has any sort of deal of damage, I think this card is just an auto include. You just throw it on your commander, you ping one of your opponent's creatures, and they will be tapped and remain tapped for as long as Nicote remains on the battlefield. Doesn't matter if it's equipped to anything, doesn't matter if your commander gets removed. As long as this equipment is sitting on the battlefield, those creatures will remain tapped. This really is a fantastic card if you have any strategy where you're throwing around damage to creatures, I think. Coming in at number 8, Night Creep. And this is a very interesting card. Doesn't seem like much, but because it is a unique effect, it can be great in certain situations. Just black and a black instant until end of turn. All creatures become black and all lands become swamps. It's a pretty powerful effect, really, if you have a way to use it, of course. It overwrites all creatures' colors, so creatures will be black instead of any other color that they currently are. That can be relevant. If you're in any deck that has that Painter's Servant, I'm manipulating creature color types, this can be another option for you. I'm doing something like that in my Dragonlord Dromoka deck where I want everyone's creatures to be black. And then I cast something like a Pygmy Kavu and draw a ton of cards. Unfortunately, that deck's not black, so I can't put this in there. But if you are in a black deck that's doing something similar, it works. Also, all lands become swamps can be great. Maybe your commander has Swamp Walk. There are a few of those. A couple of different reasons why you could throw this in a deck. It is a very unique card that way, so I thought I'd give it a mention. Coming in at number 9, Night Vale Predator. Blue, blue, black, black, vampire, 3/3. Flying, death touch, hexproof. And I had already given this card a mention in one of my videos because I think it's really criminally underplayed. And I know it doesn't seem like much, but this is the only card in the entire game of Magic that has flying, death touch, and hexproof. That's right. There are cards that can get that, but this is the only card that actually has those 3 keywords printed on it. That's pretty amazing, I think, particularly because those 3 abilities work so well together. And maybe this works in a blue-black vampire deck or, I don't know, flying tribal. The specific strategies where you might want to put this, I don't know. I think it's a great fit in a Riami deck because it has all those keyword abilities. That's where I originally had it when I made a Riami deck, and I kind of wanted it to die. And guess what? It doesn't die very easy. It's sitting on the board and I'm thinking, man, I want this thing to die so it can go into exile and give my Riami all those abilities, but it didn't. It's got hexproof, so it's really hard to get off the table, and my opponents didn't want to attack into it because it has death touch. This is just a fantastic ghostly prison type of effect. It's unbelievable how people will just not attack you if you have this in play. A lot of people will poo-poo all over Ghostly Prison and just say, hey, if they want to attack you, they'll just pay 2. Okay, but with Night Vale Predator, they won't attack you unless they want to lose their creature, which they definitely will. Really, the only way around this is if your opponent's creature has first strike so that it won't take the death touch damage. Just an amazing sort of pillow fort type of effect. Also great at getting in for damage if you're looking for something there as well. I really think you could throw this card in any Dimir deck and it's going to do lots of work for you. But coming in at number 10 is Night Dealings. Another personal favorite of mine, 2 black enchantment. Whenever a source you control deals damage to another player, put that many theft counters on Night Dealings. And then you can pay 2 black, remove X theft counters from Night Dealings, search your library for a non-land card with mana value X, reveal it and put it in your hand, then shuffle. So first of all, this is one of those cards that I started putting on a lot of decks, very similar to Nature's Will, where, okay, I'm in a black deck now, and I'm getting in for damage all the time, right? So if you're in that deck where you're getting in for damage, maybe you got that Night Vale Predator and you're guaranteed to get in for 3 damage every turn, this is a great way to take advantage of it, right? Key words here. There's some very important words here. That many theft counters, okay? So if I get in with my Night Vale Predator, I'm putting 3 counters on my night dealings. And I will just tell you right now, the theft counters don't really matter. Every single time I've had this in a game, I have so many counters on this that the fact that I need to remove however many theft counters to go get something of a certain mana value, it doesn't matter. I have like 20, 30 theft counters on it. So the theft counters pretty quickly will not be that important. This essentially becomes 4 mana, go get any card out of your deck, right? It becomes a Diabolic Tutor. This card very quickly just becomes, you can Diabolic Tutor every turn. And I know a lot of people will say that Diabolic Tutor is not good or unplayable in Commander. Maybe this is a repeatable one, which is better. A repeatable effect is always better than a one-shot, obviously. Diabolic Tutor is still in 50,000 decks on EDH Rec, so a lot of people are playing that card. I know, and here's my least favorite phrase probably in the entire format. 8 mana Tutor, that's not very good. Man, that drives me crazy. This is not an 8 mana Tutor. This is 4 mana. And then it sits there. And then later in the game, because the game's going to last longer than 4 turns, I can start paying 4 mana every turn to go get something out of my library. And later in a game, when your value starts to run out and your hand starts to get a little empty and you need answers, this really, really becomes important. I will also point out the other important phrasing on this card is whenever a source you control deals damage to another player. So it doesn't have to be a creature dealing damage. It can be anything. You can lightning bolt your opponent in the face and put 3 counters on this. If you have a Perforos out or something, all the damage the Perforos is dealing is going to put counters on this. So if you have another way to deal damage to your opponents, that also puts counters on this as well. I think it's a great card. Give it a try if you want to. But that is all for today. That is 10 more cards you should be putting in your Commander decks. And if you are thinking of purchasing any of these cards, I have a TCG Player link. It is in the description below. Give it a click. It helps support the channel. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.